Hello, I am clearly not Kevin Pollock, or I'm Kevin Pollock with a fabulous new wig. My name is Dana Gould, and I'm sitting in for Kevin, who is in, I believe, Nolans,
yes,
shooting a movie. Jamie, what movie is? So thank you for joining me, and thanks to Kevin for letting me sit in. And we have a fantastic guest today, a very good friend of mine. When Kevin said, would you like to do this, I quickly ran through my mind for an excuse to get out of it, could not come up with something in time, and said yes, because I'm afraid to say no to people, because I feel that their happiness is my responsibility, even if they're just a casual acquaintance. There was the first person that came to mind was our guest today, the lovely and talented Kelly Carlin, who is not going to be revealed yet to you, but I wanted you to know at the very top of the broadcast who was here, because sometimes the written letter can lie. People who bought a newspaper know that. So Jamie.
Yes, I feel like he gave you a lot of tasks. Like it was like, could you host? Oh, and by the way, could you book the show as well?
Could you book the show? Well, it's the way everything I've gotten in show.
And drive here and pay the crew. Did you pay the crew?
Could you? I would like to be in a movie. Great. Could you write a movie, produce the movie, get some vulcanized rubber and build some cameras? You know, I am allowed to do anything I do completely on my own. I'm in. Adam Carolla has a movie coming out. And my agency, William Morris Endeavor, refuses to acknowledge the fact that I'm an actor. And and I'm doing Adam Carolla's movie. I have a small part in the movie, and I sent my contract to them, and they sent it back. We don't represent you as an actor. So I had to troll for someone to do my contract. They don't want to do anything that might bring me joy.
Well, you bring me joy. So there you go.
So where is Kevin's in New Orleans?
Yes.
What is the movie that he's doing?
Okay, I'm totally gonna bastardize this. It's he explained it on the show before, but he is playing a hypnotist. And I know that he has like this awful wig because he's been sending me photos. And I think that it's like I don't remember. Do you remember this at all? Like he explained it on the show before. It's like he puts the people under and then they permanently stay under or something like that. I don't know. I'm doing a terrible job.
What's the name of the movie?
I have no idea. Okay. He doesn't tell me anything.
You know, on the old Tonight Show, when people like David Brenner would sit in for Johnny, they always used to just say, Johnny's away. They would never go into what Johnny was doing. That's one way in which this show is different from the old Tonight Show. But something tells me if they did go into what Johnny was doing, it was just, so where is Johnny? He's doing coke at his house. And then playing tennis very quickly. So this is nice.
I'm just waiting for Kevin to the text to come through for him to yell at me he's like, what are you doing? Quit embarrassing me.
I wanted so badly to be in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which shot in New Orleans.
I saw a poster for that last night at the Century City AMC, and I thought of you.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited. I actually auditioned for it, did not get it, but that's neither.
I don't know anything Planet of the Apes.
It's not like William Morris would have processed my contract had I gotten it.
Anything Planet of the Apes or like Universal horror monsters, I always immediately think of you.
There's certainly worse things to be associated with. The trailer for the new Apes movie is great, and it starts off with the lead character of Caesar, portrayed by Andy Serkis, going in his ape voice, apes together strong. And every comedian cell in my body wants me to then go, apes apart, not so much.
But how do you feel about the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes?
Risible, execrable. I look for new adverbs to describe how horrible it is. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes is worse than 1,000,000 9/11s. And yet he made Ed Wood, which is
I love Ed Wood.
Sheer genius every frame.
I feel like that and Pee-wee, they're my favorites.
He's a wonderful person and a brilliant artist, and I think that only a genius could get it that wrong. I do mean that. It's like only a true genius could take a movie with unlimited resources, armor-wearing apes with swords on horseback and make it somehow boring. I mean, I would make it, it's true. It would be like, I would make an interesting, only a genius would fill a donut with bugs. It's like a regular person would just put like a bad pudding or a jelly or a peanut butter in it. It might not be the best donut, but only a genius would like, what about plutonium? It's like, how did you screw that up? He did it. But that's neither here nor there. I was thinking about this last night, and then I want to introduce Kelly because she's being very patient. I went to the drive-in last night. I'm a big fan of the drive-in theater, and here in LA, there's a great one about an hour out of town, which is like going to the corner here in LA.
I'm from Pittsburgh, and we have several.
Yeah.
That's like a normal activity to go to the drive-in.
The one that I worked at in high school in Massachusetts is still extant. And is not only still going, it's actually in better shape than it was when I worked there in high school. And I hadn't been there in decades, and when I went back like 2 summers ago, it was the closest I've ever gone to like going back in time. Like everything was exactly the way it was in 1983. Really crazy. But I went to see Spider-Man 2. I don't know if you've seen it. There seem to be other movies in it. It's sort of like a Russian doll where there's 4 movies in the and I started, am I just so out of it now that I'm out of touch with how a big tentpole movie, does every tentpole movie has to have 5 endings, 7 acts, 14 subplots? I just and I feel like I'm just out of touch, but I don't think it needs to be that complicated. It's like,
I have nothing because
Jamie, no opinion.
I'm not a huge fan of tentpole movies or like superhero movies at all. I don't know.
Well, that must be hard because I don't think there are any movies now without superheroes.
I know
it's
very rare.
If they made Gone with the Wind today, it would be about Superman. It would just be, where's that guy? He went with the wind.
I mean, the last movie, I saw a movie yesterday. I saw Neighbors, which I really enjoyed, but that I guess
with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, a wonderful film. Oh no, the other one.
The Neighbors.
Yeah.
But I'm familiar with that film as well.
That's an interesting thing because they showed on, and then we'll get out of this, but like they showed John Belushi in Animal House, Will Ferrell from Old School. And what's his face, High School Musical boy, in Neighbors, Zac Efron, who's a very lovely man, by the way, very nice. In Neighbors, and it's like John Belushi is chubby guy. Will Ferrell, not out of shape, but like looks like a regular person, and then Zac Efron just totally cut. I'm like, that's how it goes.
His outfits in the movie were so tailored to like they were like painted on. It was ridiculous.
That's how it has. It's just everything is everything. Have you tried to buy a toothbrush? Everything's extreme. Like toothbrushes look like running shoes now. I just want to brush my teeth.
I buy my toothbrushes at Costco, so.
I buy them at Goodwill. I boil up a pot of water, toss in 6 used toothbrushes. I'm good to go. Long story longer. My first and only guest today, and due to viewer pressure, this episode will end with Kelly and I in hand-to-hand combat. Is the author and star of the show, A Carlin Home Companion. She has her own show on Sirius XM called Waking from the American Dream, or is that on Smodcast?
That's on Smod.
She has a show on smodcast.com called Waking from the American Dream, and she interviews comedians of note on the George Carlin channel.
It's called Carlin's Corner.
Carlin's Corner on Sirius XM.
Correct,
Which
sir.
is one of my saved stations, but it's only on the online version.
It is, and certain devices in certain cars in certain states.
Right. She is the progeny of Brenda and George Carlin, and has been a good friend of mine for a long time, and one of my more cherished friends. Please welcome the lovely and talented Kelly Carlin.
Curtsy.
Curtsy.
Curtsy. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What is your middle name, Kelly?
Marie.
That's all we have.
And we're out.
Kelly, what I thought would be interesting would be if we spent the time talking about me.
You know what? I would prefer that.
In true fashion, I'm going to I'll turn this around to me at every available point.
That'll be fine. I'm used to that. I used to be a therapist, so.
Yes. Now, you used to be a therapist. You were raised clearly in Southern California in show business.
Yes.
Your dad is famous.
Correct.
You are so as a child, at what point do you realize, and I'm not going to move through this interview chronologically, but and I will draw, at what point do you realize, oh, other people aren't like my family? My family's different from other families.
Yeah. It kind of came, like kind of peeling an onion kind of a thing. But I really think that I really got that when early 70s we went on the road with my dad. And I was about 9 or 10, right around there. And people would chant his name at concerts. He had become the counterculture guy at that point. And that's when I knew, like, he's special. Like, they're treating him like a god, basically.
Right.
But as a younger kid, my mother tells a story. I have no memory of this. I guess I was about 2.5 years old, and my dad was going to be on TV. So this was about 1966.
Okay.
Short hair, God knows what kind of show it is.
Yeah, your dad's not, at this point, as people remember him,
right,
sort of bearded
unless you're over
ponytail.
60.
Yeah, right.
And
he would look normal today. He looked like Don Draper.
Yes, he looked just like Don Draper. And my mom was excited because my dad was going to be on something, who knows, Ed Sullivan or something like that. And so she was excited because I was old enough to finally get the TV thing or whatever, she thought. And so, it's live TV back then, and she's all excited. Daddy's going to be on the TV tonight, and we're going to sit down. And she turns it on, and she plops me in front of it, and the announcer says, "And here's George Carlin." And this little 3-inch man comes walking out onto this glowing box, and my father's voice comes out at me. And I immediately begin to cry and scream and run out of the room. Where's my daddy? Where's my daddy?
Oh, that's hilarious, because you thought he was shrunken down and in the box.
Yes. So I knew something was up at that moment.
Yeah, I find that interesting. Ben Stiller, who's also the child of famous comedians, told me a story that his parents opened for Gladys Knight and the Pips. And as a child, he was in Vegas with his parents, and the Pips taught him to swim. And he was so funny because he goes, "I thought they taught everyone how to swim."
Right, exactly.
Why wouldn't the Pips teach you how to swim?
Because it's all perfectly normal.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was
taught to swim by the Crickets, Buddy Holly's backup group.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
at gunpoint.
In 1975, my mom had gotten sober. My parents went through a really dark period, and we were in Hawaii for Christmas. We decided to go to the Kahala Hilton for Christmas. And we arrived there, and we find out that Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet are having a New Year's Eve party thing, show, and Sammy Davis Jr. is going to be there. So my dad knows all these people. So we end up at the dinner table with them, and we end up at their show. And after the show, I'm 12 years old, and I'm standing there with my dad and Sammy Davis Jr., and they're talking about cocaine and the evils of it and how my mom got sober, and Sammy says he's trying to get away from it, everything. And I'm 12 years old, and I'm standing there involved in the conversation.
Right.
Like, this is perfectly normal. Like, all 12-year-olds hang out with their dad and their friends, and they talk about drug addiction.
Everybody, all 12-year-old kids.
Yes.
It's one of the rites of passage of adolescence.
Completely.
Talking about blow with Sammy.
With Sammy, with one of the Redbacks.
One of the Redback. Kevin Pollock, who normally sits in this chair.
I think I've heard of him, yes.
Yeah, he's actually on the phone right now.
Oh, of course he is.
So is he in? Can we hear him? Kevin?
Hello, testing 1, 2, show business.
Hi, Kevin. How are you? Welcome to your show.
Let me start by saying this is the single best episode of the chat show thus far.
Thank you very much.
When it's over, Dana, I'd like you to call me immediately to negotiate a deal for you to replace me permanently.
All I know is I know what agency won't do the contract.
Yeah, WME officially does not represent you as an actor. I checked with them after hearing you say that. I got 17 of their agents in a conference call, none of which would speak to me. But I just wanted to tap in real quick and say I'm in the chat room. I'm loving the show. You're doing great. Please continue. Forgive me for interrupting. You have my love and support. And back to you, Dana.
Wait, what is the name of the movie you're shooting in New Orleans?
Yeah, because I did a horrible job explaining it. Because you don't tell me
Yeah.
anything. And I also love how I'm looking at the speakers.
I know,
if you're
we're all
here.
looking at the speaker.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. It's like a scene from real life. We're looking at the speaker as if that's you. Look
I have
who's
two
here.
words.
It's the pea hoarder.
I got 2 words for you. Jimmy Kahn.
I'm going to refinish some old furniture.
Yeah, the movie had the single worst title in cinema history, and I've convinced the writer-director, who's from Mexico City, English being his second language, wrote a hilarious, wildly funny script. The rarity here is that I get to be funny, which doesn't seem to happen in my acting film career. But the title is Mind Puppets. There, I said it. Worst film title in history.
My puppets.
Mind puppets. Mind.
Mind. Oh, that's not bad.
But no, that's okay.
I'm gonna just throw out a worse title for you right now. Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
Bingo.
Very few movies. You rarely hear 12-year-old boys excited to see a movie with the word pants in the title. And that's what you need for a big opening weekend.
I made the same argument against the word puppets. Now, listen,
Yeah.
I really am going to hop off here, and I'm enjoying the hell out of this, so please go back to the spectacular job. Just know that I'm in a hotel room in New Orleans scrutinizing every second.
Thank you very much. New Orleans, as Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants, once said, New Orleans, it's Disneyland for alcoholics.
Bingo.
And I'm
Yeah,
wondering,
man.
Thanks, Kev.
I'm wondering, I was conceived in New Orleans in a hotel room,
Really?
wondering if possibly Kevin is in that exact hotel room right now.
How did your parents know?
Well, this is, from what I understand, they've been trying to get pregnant and they didn't, and they went down there, and my mom did the limbo, and she was pregnant 3 weeks later, so they knew. I don't know, maybe they weren't having a lot of sex. I don't know, but they had determined the 10 days they spent in New Orleans, I was conceived.
Now, my birthday is August 24th, 1964, which is 9 months and 2 days after the Kennedy assassination.
Wow.
Which tells you everything you need to know about how my father processes grief. Apparently, Lee Harvey Oswald was not the only fella to get off a lucky shot that day.
Oh, Lord, that's good.
It's a very strange thing, and I imagine that it must have been, my
Yeah.
dad, any excuse.
Any excuse.
So your dad is, and did you, because I was talking about Ben's parents are famous comedians,
Yes.
and he went right into, followed
into the
their,
biz.
yeah, right into the biz, and I actually think that's more common than not.
Probably.
Well, that's not true. You only hear about the people that have done it successfully.
Yeah, there are plenty of us in this town who rambled around, and
Right.
some of which didn't make it at all.
Yeah.
I decided to work out my father issues in my 20s and marry an older man who was a cocaine addict and was also on probation for a federal weapons charge.
Right.
So that's what I needed to do in my 20s. I kind of skipped the career
How
part.
older?
11 years.
No, that's not too
I
bad.
was 18, he was 29.
That's not too bad.
He was married with a kid.
Right.
Whatever.
Okay.
It was fun. He moved into my
So
bedroom.
that's like going. That's like going to dinner with somebody who's already eaten. Wow. Okay.
So I didn't go directly. I didn't feel fit for the real world yet in my 20s. So I went off and went into this
What is a
Strangely.
federal weapons charge as opposed to a local or state
He
weapons
made
charge?
silencers for semi-automatic rifles because he was a genius. He was one of those mechanical genius persons, and it was
Right.
really easy. He'd go into a hardware store, pick 5 or 6 parts, and make these silencers. And he'd only made them for his, he was a car mechanic by trade, and he'd made them for his doctor and lawyer friends in Beverly Hills who wanted to shoot their guns off in the backyard.
Yeah.
And
silencers are for people that just like, they love guns, but then they go, it's so loud.
Exactly. He wasn't selling them to
That's one thing you never see in like action
Sandinistas.
movies, like, ow.
No. So somehow the ATF got wind of this and decided to bust him for it, and he ended up not going to jail, luckily, because he came from Brentwood and a good family.
Sure.
He came from a showbiz family also.
What you're trying to say is he was white.
He was white.
So he didn't go to jail.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
So yeah.
Okay. So, but you became a psychiatrist.
No, I didn't actually. I didn't do that until
A therapist.
I didn't do that until 2001. I went to grad school, got my master's in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
In my 30s, in the 90s, in my 30s, I did lots of things, different things in showbiz. I wrote, Bob and I wrote a
Bob is your
thriller together.
husband
Bob, my
now.
husband,
Yeah.
Bob McCall.
Not wanted by the government at all.
No, not that one,
Yeah.
not the first one. We wrote spec scripts. We wrote an episode of my dad's Fox show. We
Right.
wrote
that's wonderful.
straight to cable thriller. I dabbled in a little bit of acting stuff and a little documentary work.
It is interesting because if you are raised, it's not only that you're raised in the business, and it's sort of, you have a natural proclivity to sort of swim in the same stream as your family.
Yeah.
But if you grow up in Southern California, and as you said, you're 12 years old, you're meeting Sammy Davis Jr. at a party.
Yep.
It's the business that is the main business in town.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want, people like go, how do you live in LA? Well, I'm in show business.
Yeah, I mean, you live
if you're
here
a
because-
minor, you go to Virginia.
Exactly. Yeah, and I went to a high school. I went to Crossroads and was surrounded by the business and
Right.
everything. And I mean, I always felt and knew that I wanted to be in the business. I mean, Lily Tomlin and Carol Burnett were my heroes. That I wanted to be them.
Right.
That's what I wanted to do. But I didn't. I guess my particular issue was my dad's shadow was pretty big for me.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me to even fathom the idea of being able to go out in the world and have a voice of my own or a slice of something that isn't his. And I was afraid. I was always afraid of being compared to him. And I'd never wanted to be a stand-up. That was easy for me.
That's a blessing to
Yeah.
not want to be
I knew that.
a stand-up with that last name. That's, that would be daunting. But did you, as you know, you're growing up with your dad, your father in the 70s when you are an adolescent,
Yes.
and your mom at the same time. You've talked about both of your parents are struggling with addiction.
Yes.
During your adolescence.
Yeah.
They were also, your parents were struggling with addiction during my adolescence, and I have problems with it. But as a child of people that have a fondness for
Chemicals.
that are sold in certain specific sections of certain stores.
Yes.
One of the things that people don't realize, I think, is if you grow up the child of an addict, you're not really allowed to be a child.
Correct.
You have to take on a lot of adult responsibility on your own.
Yes.
And later on in life, when you are an adult, your childhood goes, no. Now I want my time.
Yeah, I think that must have been what my 20s was about,
Right.
probably. Yeah, because starting at about age 4 or 5, it became, my dad was on the road a lot, and my mom was drinking heavily at that
Right.
point, and it became pretty clear, and I was an only child, that, oh, there's no one here to take care of mommy.
Right.
So I guess I have to, on whatever that means to a 5-year-old, which means be a good girl, mostly, not get into trouble, and just take on the emotional burden of your mother's happiness. And then their happiness as a couple. I became the diplomat mediator of all of their arguments
Right.
into the cocaine years.
Okay, yeah. Which is just like the alcoholic years, but much faster.
Oh yes, and much angrier. Lots more rage in the cocaine years.
So let me ask you a couple quick questions, because leading up to something that I find very, very interesting that you told me about. How present was your dad in your life as a kid? Because your dad is on the road all the time.
He was physically on the road, but emotionally he was my center. He was the center of my universe, because mom was drunk, so
Right.
she was the loose, funny this one.
Right.
But when dad came home, he smoked a little weed or whatever, but he was
There.
George. He was George Carlin. He was the center of the universe. And so he was ever present, and he was my ally, taking care of my mom.
Did you have people that went shopping for you?
Yes, we did. We had lots of people who stayed at our house, who were friends. Dad, in the crazy, dark 70s years, hired a man to basically be my driver so my mother wouldn't have to drive. And back in those days, you could also call the local market and you have an account and they would deliver things to your house.
Because I'm just wondering if your dad, who is at this point like a huge star, comes home and has to go to Ralph's. Could he even go to Ralph's?
He could. He did. He did back then. Back then,
Yeah.
he did everything for sure. Yes, and we did have a delivery. I would call down the hill to the liquor store and
because you grew up in the
and
Palisades.
We did.
Right?
We grew up in the Palisades
Right.
for a few years. So, yeah, there was always frozen dinners in the freezer, no matter what. Swanson's and Stouffer's were basically sponsoring my childhood.
I had those. We had Taste OC, which were purportedly frozen TV dinners, fish-based.
Yes.
Fish-based frozen dinners, and we had these hot dogs that I ate a lot of as a kid called KM Old Time hot dogs that came on a string, like you'd see on the Stooges.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah, and lots of things that kids that don't grow up in this environment don't understand, like the parental covering. Oh, Daddy fell asleep on the bathroom floor. Isn't Daddy funny?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was realizing, and this is what made me think of it. When I was, I guess, 11 or 12, my parents went to, my mom went to visit her family in Virginia for about 3 weeks or 3 months during the summer.
Right.
And my dad was just not around. He worked, and my dad's involvement with us as a kid was like, you can live here till you're 18.
Right.
And that was the extent of the advice he would give you. It was like, you can live here till you're 18. What if I want to do something? Join the army. Literally, it was just like that was the extent of it. But I have a wonderful relationship with him now. Long story short, we had a friend of ours who was AWOL from the Marines hiding in our house. And the Marines knew he was there. And so every day during that summer, the MPs would come to the house and ask if they could come in and find this person.
Oh, wow.
And they couldn't enter the house without permission. So my brothers would make me, like I could do anything I wanted after the MPs came.
Right.
So I would have to wait for the MPs to come, go to the door, eye level with their guns, tell them, no, I don't know who's here. No, you can't come in. And then they would leave, and then I could go do whatever the heck I wanted. When I was like 29, I just like one day sat up and thought, a 12-year-old shouldn't have that responsibility.
Yes.
I shouldn't have to have that. I shouldn't be dealing with that at 12.
You were
that
turning
shouldn't-
away the U.S. Army.
Yeah, and my father had a thing. He was always complaining about like we're gonna, money worries, and like we're gonna lose the house. I don't know what we're gonna do, And like a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid should not be walking around. Where are we gonna live?
Yes.
How are we gonna survive? It's just like things that kids don't need to take on.
Yeah.
And you once, at a very young age, staged an intervention for your parents.
I did. I did.
Now, how old are you at this point?
This was in Hawaii, and I believe I was 10 at this age.
Oh, so you were a professional.
I was. By this time, I had about 5 years under my belt. And yeah, we were in Hawaii, and this was during the crazy cocaine years. So this is 73, 74. We're on our first Hawaiian vacation. We're excited. We can afford a Hawaiian vacation. We're at this place called the Napili Kai in Maui. And we go to Lahaina the first day and spend the whole day in the bar, hanging out in the bar because Dad needs to score.
Right.
So never mind swimming in the ocean and snorkeling and all of that. I'm hanging out in a bar.
Sure.
At least he kept giving me money so I could go shopping.
Right.
And then we get back.
I did that. I would get quarters to go play pinball.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
My dad's.
We just go off.
I love you, Jim Fox, but you're drunk, and he would like take me to the bar, and then it was a table. It was a cocktail table arcade cabinet, and it was like he would just give me quarters so he could like drink at the bar.
Yeah, my dad would say, "Do you guys want to go in the truck?" Because we had a pickup truck. So yeah. And we'd all jump in the back of the truck, and then we're like, oh, no, because we knew where the bar was. Oh, Dad! And up to the Nip Muck Rod and Gun Club. And
the bar was Campbell Mike's, I remember. Like, I still have that embedded in my brain.
And then it was Coke, Reese cups, and pinball all day. And then
I think mine was Slim Jims. I think I got like Slim Jims and played Pac-Man on the tabletop.
Yeah, and then in what I can only describe as a bukkake of irresponsibility, driving home in the back of a pickup truck at night along a bumpy road with a drunken driver.
Well done. I have those memories too.
Yeah. It's you don't realize at the time, I could have died.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of did, but that made it even more
Not that we
fun.
all have this in common.
Yes,
we share this.
Well, it's a quiet brotherhood.
We're having an Al-Anon meeting right now.
We are. But so how does one at 10 years old know that they need to stage an intervention for their
so
parents?
we're in the bungalow at our hotel, and my parents have been they're arguing because my dad's hiding coke from my mom, and she wants more, and he says it's all gone. And at some point, knives are now being brandished. And now I'm 10 or 11 at this point. This has been a good 3 solid years of this kind of behavior at home. A lot of screaming and yelling, a lot of rage, a lot of cocaine and alcohol-fueled insanity. And I have reached my breaking point, and my parents are brandishing knives at each other, and I lose it. I fucking lose it emotionally, and to the point where I'm in a ball of tears, curled up in the fetus position in the corner, can't take it anymore, and finally gets their fucking attention. And my dad says this moment was like when he finally realized, like out of the fog, oh shit, we're really fucking our kid up. And I say to them, I can't take it anymore. So I take out a piece of paper and I write on it, I, George Carlin / Brenda Carlin, will not drink alcohol or snort cocaine for the rest of this vacation. And I write out basically a UN-style peace treaty for them. The whole thing.
10,
I'm 10.
Which is amazing because at that age, certainly in my case, and I bet in Jamie's case, the primary motivation of a kid is, let me get as far away from this as I can.
Yeah, no, but we were.
And you went right, because you were the only child, you were such a family unit. I was the 5th of 6. Basically, if I was not on fire, I could do what I wanted.
If these people were going away or dying, I'm screwed. I don't have anything. I don't have a backup plan with this at all. There's no siblings around to catch me. And I made little dotted lines, and they signed it, and it was really wonderful for about 20, 25 minutes until my dad went into the bathroom, locked the door in the bathroom, and Mother immediately was like, oh, okay, fine, I see where this is going, and she went down to the bar and ordered another bottle of Mateus Rosé, and Dad came out with rings of coke around his nose. So, but at least they didn't kill each other that vacation. Right. I pulled them back from the brink. Right.
And was the rest of the vacation just?
I ended up, the little kiosk booth where they rent the snorkel gear. That's where I hung out the whole vacation with the girl who rented the snorkel gear, and I helped fill out the rental slips the whole time.
Wonderful and heartbreaking.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Yeah. But we've
all. You did that in Hawaii.
Yes.
I was in a bar. I was at the Nipmuc Riding Uncle. See how I bring it back to me. So cocaine which I've never done, but I've certainly, as a comedian in the 80s, have seen my share of it.
Sure. They used to pay you guys in the 80s.
I was, yes.
So you weren't being paid at all.
Well, I was, but no, I have been asked white or green, which was their way of saying, do you want money or Coke?
Wow.
It is such a pernicious drug in terms of its addictive capability that you really don't have parents if they're Coke addicts.
Yeah.
You know, that is their primary motivation.
Yes, that and sorting out all the bolts and nuts in the house because they need to be sorted at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I remember hearing your father say on a show after he had gotten clean, I knew I had a drug problem when I realized I was washing my lawn.
Exactly, that's the level of it. Yeah.
And when did your mother got sober first? Or
She
your
did
father
in
got sober
'75.
first?
Yes, she got down to 87 pounds. She was 3 weeks away from being dead.
Right.
The doctor said, you're going to the hospital.
Or nowadays, 5 pounds away from being able to go on television.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. She almost died, and when they went in, they didn't know if she'd make it or not because she was coming off of Valium and Coke and alcohol, and Valium
Staring down the barrel of renal failure, I would imagine.
Yeah,
87 pounds.
and seizures and all sorts of stuff. Valium's got a half-life and it stays in your system for however many millennium, and so. But she stayed sober. She did great. She stayed sober till the day she died. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. And but your father didn't get clean till a long time after that.
It was a gradual process. He knew enough not to come home with bags of cocaine after that. Mom knew that he'd smoked weed since he was 14. Weed was not an issue. Back then, alcohol, Dad drank a couple of beers, whatever. But he started slowly. The cocaine slowly started going away. It was on the road more. It was that kind of things.
Right.
He would then every once in a while disappear for 3 or 4 days. We didn't know where he was. That happened. I mean, that was up into the mid 80s or so. He would disappear, and we figured he's off binging somewhere with somebody, and. But he eventually got rid of all of that. He knew it was bad for his heart too. And then he, at some point just didn't really smoke a lot of weed. And then at age 66, I think it was, 68, it was a few years before he died, he called me up and said, I'm going to rehab. I've been addicted. I take about 6 to 10 Vicodin a day, and I've been binge drinking, and that's nothing for Vicodin addicts, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 20, 30 is what the real. But I binge drink 2 bottles of red wine on the road lately, and I'm tired of it, and I'm sick and tired of this, and I'm just going to go, and I'm going to go to rehab finally. And I'm like, okay, Dad, and he did.
Wow.
So the last, I think, 3 years he was alive, he was completely sober.
That is amazing. I remember reading Stephen King said it took him 2 complete years. From the day he decided to stop drinking, it took him 2 years to stop. It's not easy, and slipping is a part of addiction and recovery.
It is.
Because you also became a drug and alcohol
even though I was the
enthusiast.
I was the one in the household hiding my mother's alcohol and wanting to dump all their Coke down the toilet. By the time I was 14, I started.
And you can tell when that's happened because then the toilet's like, anybody gonna pee? Come on, who wants to pee? Somebody's gonna pee. Flush me. Not really.
Do it again.
Toilets don't talk.
Well.
But a lesser comic would do 40 minutes on that. And then the toilet be saying, somebody got to pee. And the doorknob handle be saying, don't turn me. No, the doorknob is not saying that.
I think that's a new Pixar movie.
That's a new Pixar movie. It's the Junkie's Bathroom 2. Junkie's Bathroom 2.
The sequel.
Assignment Miami Beach.
Assignment Miami Beach is Police Academy 5. By the way.
I'm very well aware of it. I'm doing a new movie. It's a sequel with no original movie called Ghost Protocol: Winter Soldier. Mission Impossible 4: Ghost Protocol, obviously inspired by the play. How old were you when you became addicted to what?
I was 14 when I started stealing roaches from my dad's stash, and I pretty much started smoking pot every single day. All through high school, I don't think I was sober a single day. I know I smoked pot just about every day. And then when I met my first husband, Andrew, at 18,
The gun runner.
the gun runner with the really good Coke stash and a lot of it, that's when, for about 3 years there, I was involved. And strangely enough, though, living in, for the first year, living in my bedroom in my parents' house with this man doing mixing bowls amount of cocaine. And there was my sober mom going off to an AA meeting, and
Right.
dad going off to the road somewhere, and there I was in my bedroom, putting out rails and.
Wow.
And yes, and definitely got seduced by that drug also.
Well, you do. It's really interesting how these things run through your life under the surface. Where I was growing up, I didn't know people who weren't alcoholics. Mm-hmm. I have older brothers and my parents and their friends. Everybody, I'm using alcoholics loosely, everybody drank.
Right.
And it was what they did.
Yep.
Blue collar, Massachusetts in the 70s and 80s, that's what you did. Mm-hmm. When then I went to college and I went out into the world, all of my roommates, alcoholics. I am not an alcoholic. I've been drunk once. And I just basically defined my personality by doing the opposite of.
So you made a conscious decision, I'm never going to do that.
Yeah, there was just no mystery to it. I genuinely defined my personality by being the opposite of all that.
Right.
That said, a train wreck. Seriously, because
There's something that's
self-parented, but had no idea what I was doing.
But it's only the symptom. I mean, the alcohol
exactly.
and the Coke
The pathology
is
is the same.
The depression and the anxiety is there.
Yeah.
And if you're any kind of a sensitive, creative type of, right brain type of human,
Right.
you're fucked in this world.
Right.
It's too intense. It's too much, and your neurology is just constantly saying, I can't take this. I can't take this. Numb me, tamp it down. So,
so you go in a very subconscious way to what you know.
Yeah, you do. And hey, at 14, it's 1977, 1976. It's the original cast of Saturday Night Live. It's Monty Python. It's Haagen-Dazs ice cream. It's Sesame and Buds. I mean, of course you're going to be a stoner.
Right.
I was growing up around Hollywood kids. We
Right.
had all the money,
Elephant bells.
all the access, and none of the responsibility. Our parents didn't make us do anything to earn any of that. So we took advantage of, and our parents were doing it too. Most of our parents had pot stashes. We would just go in and just fill up a baggie and off we would go,
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's that Syra McFadden novel, Serial, which talks about life in Marin in the late 70s. And that whole sort of West Coast culture defined and personified by the Eagles.
Oh, yes.
Everyone
Yes.
looked like the Eagles.
Yes, they did.
And certainly, you're not only growing up in the epicenter of it, but your family is one of the touchstones.
Yeah, and it's almost like, to be a Carlin, to be a true Carlin, you've got to be pushing against, you have to represent that in some way. I mean, I
Right.
think there was maybe a sense of a pride in it almost,
Right. It would have been interesting and not too far from conceivability, if that is a word, that you pulled a Michael J. Fox from that show and became a super conservative,
Right.
just to go in the opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, that's not too far what I did. Not that I'm conservative, but everyone in my family are Reagan Republicans now. We were Democrats, but they
Right.
all went over to, they went Republican with Reagan in the end, because it's a hunting culture.
Yeah.
They're all Fox News, Boston Herald, Republican, Bill
Yeah.
O'Reilly.
Yeah, I know I wouldn't have, because I worshipped my dad too much. I wanted
Yeah.
him to approve of me too
Right.
much, so I would never have done something like that. I was
Yeah.
all about making sure Dad's happy with me, and
It's funny. It was my mother was just visiting, and I had MSNBC on, which she'd never seen or didn't know that there was.
Existed.
Didn't know that there was another view to the news as slanted and full of baloney as Fox News, and I had to explain to her that Chris Hayes was just Rachel Maddow without glasses.
Right.
It's like Clark Kent and Superman. He takes off the glasses and it's the Rachel Maddow show. And then he puts them on and it's Chris Hayes. It's like Clark Kent and Superman, Mom. But she was unfamiliar with our cartoon news.
Yes.
But this was so. Now you're in the late 70s, and there was something that I read in your father's book that I wanted to ask you about, to witness. There was in the late 79, and they were saying goodbye to the 70s. It was like in Esquire or something. And it was this long list of things. It was no more bell-bottoms, no more blank, no more blank, no more blank, no more blank. And to the bottom was no more George Carlin. And your dad, who was a icon, suddenly is out of fashion.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to know was, clearly he realized it. How did it affect him? And how did that, if at all, affect you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I only really learned about that in hindsight, and learned about it, hearing him talk about it a little bit, but really learned about it when I read Last Words and read that section where he talked about, given a chance to turn back around towards the middle, I took it. And when I look back on it now, how it affected the family was, creatively, he had run out of steam. And it was a time, he had had a heart attack also around that time. I think that scared the hell out of him. His dad died very early from a massive heart attack.
Right. Also an alcoholic.
Also raging, brutal alcoholic. He didn't know his father, but,
Right.
And I think that really scared him. And now the culture was changing. And there was, Saturday Night Live, SCTV,
Right.
This whole new brand of comedy, Steve Martin.
Right.
And he floundered for a while. But hey, I'm 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old during this time. Do I give a shit what my parents are doing? No.
Right. You're unaware of it.
Can I have $100 for some weed and the credit card so I can go shopping on Rodeo Drive? Sure.
Right.
I was a narcissistic, out of control teenager. Zero idea. I assumed everything was fine in our family. This was also during the time when my father found out he owed over $1 million to the government, in back taxes.
Ironically, not our government.
Right. Yes. The Argentinian government.
Yeah.
Strangest thing. So suddenly he had this weird pressure on him, and his career was falling apart at the same time.
Right.
He couldn't sell out 700 seaters at this time. Steve Martin's selling out arenas.
Right.
My dad can't put together a college gig at this point. It was getting bad. But I knew nothing about
And that's about 1978?
78, 79, 80, right around there.
Right.
He started turning things around a little bit, doing the Stuff thing. I think that was
82.
82. And then the big comeback was Carlin at Carnegie. That
Right.
was when his new manager had come into his life about 4 years before that, and they started rebuilding his career in a new direction. And God bless HBO. HBO is what came in 78. 78 and 79, my dad did 2 HBO shows, but no one had HBO. 10,000 people were watching HBO, maybe, if we were lucky at
Right.
this time. But here was this place that said you can say whatever you want and do whatever you want. And my dad had these large chunks of material that he could go out and do, and it was a special place for him. And I think that for his ego, it helped him as an artist. Like, I have a special place to go. They want me. And it also gave him a new thing, like, oh, I can go back and do that again. And so he started having this thing of, well, now where should we do it? Well, let's do it at Carnegie Hall. That would be, an iconic place for me. I mean,
Right.
he'd played it twice before in the early 70s, but that'll be something special. And
it's a different era in that he is so identified with the 70s, the groovy.
yeah,
You know, that it's almost.
This is the Reagan era.
Yeah, people.
This is the beginning of the Reagan era.
And people are just like, I'm done with that.
Yeah.
It is human nature that it's going to come around again.
Yes.
But, you know, to fight that, and I think that I was going to say artist, but I think that any adult, you know, you can only be new once. And it is human nature that at a certain point, the next wave comes in to replace you.
Yes.
Whether you're an actor or a writer or a comedian or a house painter or an air conditioning repair
Yes.
person. And there does come a time where you have to subsume, if that's a word, I think it might be,
I think it is.
your ego.
Yes.
And say, okay, I have to go eat a little shit now.
Yeah, and it's humbling, and I think it made him start to dig deeper into, okay, you know, I kind of wrote on the, you know, the analyzing all the shit in my belly button stuff, you know, the P's and all that kind of stuff. What is it now that I want to start saying? And you know, and in the 80s he was still doing the observational stuff, but you know, that stuff routine, that's smart stuff. That's a smart.
Yeah, and that's like for
genius.
those of you, I can't imagine people don't know what we're talking about. A place for my stuff.
A place for my stuff, yeah, and it's you know, it's iconic Carlin. It's words, it's observational.
Not only that, but what introduced him sort of right along the time of Carnegie Hall, because now my own memory is coming into it, because my mom took me. I wanted to be a comedian from a very young age, watching your father on Flip Wilson, not the show.
Were you with me that night?
Me, Flip, and Sammy.
That's weird.
But, and so when I was 16, my mom took me to see your dad, and this must have been 81 or 82, early, you know, yeah, 82, and 16, 17. So and he was on Comic Relief.
Yes, that's when he brought the stuff routine. That was the first time he did it.
Which everybody was watching.
Yes.
HBO
It
is
was
now in
huge.
more homes than before.
Yep.
But it was actually a bit about homelessness, really.
Yes.
So it tied in thematically, and it reminded everybody, no, actually, no one does this as well as this person. That's true. It's like,
Yes. Yeah, he was damn smart. He
everybody,
was.
Tom Hanks once said about Steven Spielberg, here's a guy who every couple of years comes out and rewrites the rules of how to make a movie. And that's sort of like what I think that your father did, is that every couple of years he would come out and reset the bar.
Yeah.
They go, and then gunk.
Yeah, and for himself, because he loved a challenge. He was a man, he was ambitious and driven and always striving for perfection. He was a perfectionist, and if he was getting bored, it wasn't okay with him. And certainly those last 15, 17, 18 years, 20 years of his career, man, you know,
Cranking it.
and always setting the bar another notch higher for himself. Yeah.
I want to ask a couple more questions on this line, and then we're going to bring in some questions that people have asked, and then I want to get into the things that you're doing now with things that are ahead of you. When he started to get into that new sort of zone where he's doing an HBO special every other year, and he's sort of he's now in a sort of a professional creative rhythm, and his life is stable. You're now an adult.
Yes.
Did you two achieve a level of like détente? At what point did you come together?
Oh yeah, no, we'd never come apart, my dad and I, because he was the ally in my life. I mean, he was the one who was always the stable center of my universe. So I was lucky that he was always there for me. My mother, I had to sew a lot of things back together with, because that was the early abandonment for me emotionally. And that took some time in my 20s, and in my 20s my mom and I did that. My dad and I, it was an interesting dance though, because it was me needing to make sure that he knew that I was okay and that I'm doing the best I can. That was the big kind of dynamic between us. And so and everything in my head, like, once I got out of my first marriage and was sober, and I'd graduated UCLA at age 30, all that was done for me. And now it was like, oh, now I need to go and have a life and have a career. Finally, I get to have my 20s.
Right, yeah. I
in my 30s,
totally understand that.
And so this is like, 92, 93, when my dad is now doing Jammin' in New York. I mean, he is now...
Yeah, and that
made
was a
another
big
fucking
creative
huge
big watershed
fucking
for
leap.
himself.
Yes, and I am just figuring out, how.
By the way, and I can say this now, your father, terrible dresser.
Agreed. Black and black, done, don't want to think about it, fuck that shit. Although when he would wear an Armani to the Grammys or something, and he would be like, hey, look at me in my suit, but t-shirt guy.
Yeah.
But so for me, it was, and the thing that I had, so my dad and I emotionally, we were great together, but I carried around this huge shadow thinking, well, if I'm not on a stage and 5,000 people aren't chanting my name, it equals failure.
Sure.
So any choice...
It does.
Right.
But go on.
Thank you, Dana. So any choice I would put on the menu would be like, documentary filmmaker, I don't know, just nothing. So I had a lot of, even though I was sober and in a stable relationship and doing well, and my parents loved me, we were all back together and stitched together, I was as lost as ever.
Sure, yeah.
And my poor dad, I know he just kept saying to me, kiddo, you're doing great. You're going to be great. He knew I was a good writer. He knew I was a performer. You're fine. You're good. You're fine. But what I always wanted for him was like, hey, let's collaborate on something, or let's do this together, or let's do that. I kind of wanted the oh God, I'm blanking on the name. The guy who did the Pink Panther.
Ellen Cleghorn.
No.
Blake Edwards?
Blake Edwards and his daughter, they would collaborate and they would do things. My dad even did a film of theirs that Jennifer had written with her dad, and I was like, oh, I want that with my dad. And Dad, solo artist. He's got his thing. He's doing his thing.
That's interesting. My oldest daughter is 11, and she wrote 2 stories for her class. One about when our dog died, and one about when we went to China to adopt her younger sister. And I'm her dad, clearly, but they're both really well written. Mm-hmm. Like at her teacher conference, they were like, these are really good. And I'm like, and I did not touch it. I didn't know she wrote them.
You didn't punch it up.
Didn't know she wrote them until she gave them to me.
Right.
And just things like that, and things like talking about being on the plane going to China. I wanted to watch television. Mom took out her credit card, so blue and shiny, and swiped the screen to life.
Wow.
That's a lot for an 11-year-old.
Yes, it is.
And things about our dog, finding our dog's hair in her food, just like really amazing. And I'm like, I wanna get in there, but I'm like, no, I also just want to let this flower bloom on its own.
And that was my dad.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I just want to let this flower bloom on its own.
Yeah. Well, he had a hovering.
I can see the other side of that.
He had a hovering mother. He had a mother who hovered and wanted to shape him into her version of him.
Now,
and he rebelled against that from age 3, I believe. So he never wanted to do that.
A really funny story about that.
Yes.
That your father complained that his mother was always making lists, and it drove him berserk.
And yet,
His life was reciting itemized things.
and lists
Did
everywhere.
he realize that at all? Because a friend of mine who wrote on the George Carlin show on Fox said, when he told us that,
Yeah.
we were like,
Hello,
Yeah.
insight.
Yeah.
I don't, he in his elder years definitely saw how his mother's mind and his father's mind really did shape him. But yes, it is very funny because his OCD list kind of, that's what made him so prolific. That's what made him, the Ziploc baggies I have of little notes in his handwriting with different subject matters written on the I have those because that was his OCD mind. Those were his versions of lists. And of course, he was always going on stage, whether it was the 7 Dirty Words or Modern Man, which is basically a long list.
Right.
But he wanted to not shape me and influence me in that direct way, whereas I just wanted him to say, go do this. I just wanted some fucking direction. Tell me what to do.
I can relate to that, and yet that's at the same point as an adult where you, as I said, have to abandon your ego a bit and acknowledge that there are people lined up to replace you.
Yes, we're not the gods we think we are.
Right, we're not immortal. You also get to the realization that you have to forgive your parents and move on.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't know how this works for people who are genuinely, intentionally abused.
Right.
That's a higher calling.
Which I think it's still applicable, but it's a tougher road, definitely.
Yeah, but like if you're, your parents, and I would say to a lesser degree my parents, I wouldn't say to a lesser degree, I would say to the same degree.
Yeah, I would.
My parents. These are people that are doing the best they can. They are
100%.
coping. Yeah.
100%. Absolutely.
Neither one of us was physically battered around. They never came, I'm going to hurt you now. It was never that. It was more of
it was chaos.
It was chaos and I wouldn't say benign neglect. It was unintentional neglect, not realizing, no, you're neglecting me now. Don't make me an adult. Don't make me, I can't be your parent. I'm trying to be a kid.
And I think a lot of us who grew up in that particular decade, in that particular time, that's what happened.
Yeah.
It's kind of just what happened during that decade.
And I do think it's a thing with the counterculture. Like, I'm also friends with, the Zappa family.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of thinking, maybe it wasn't the greatest.
Yeah, we were kind of raised by wolves a little bit. We were left to our own devices.
Exactly,
And some of us luckily made it out, and the forgiveness thing is a huge part of it, and years of therapy, thank you, helped me with that, and I think that's also partly why I ended up going to grad school to get my master's in psychology, because I wanted to really sort through all of it in a very deep way. And if you're going to become a therapist, they make you do that. And so it was a real blessing for me. It's really where I healed my mom's stuff, and it was after she died. And she and I had healed a lot of stuff, but it was where I really healed the deepest part of it and could really finally put aside this negative version of my mother that was in my head that I felt was always kind of keeping me down. I could really finally let go of that. And then with my dad, since he died, that's some of the work I've done also. Even realizing that there was a negative version of my dad, which I kind of, it wasn't negative, but it was a version that kind of kept me smaller than I wanted to be. So.
You told me once, he said, that when you decided to go on stage and do your show.
Oh yes, he wasn't happy about that.
That he said that you were betraying him.
I had betrayed him, yes, emotionally betrayed him.
I don't know if I could handle that if my dad said that to me.
Yeah, thankfully it was in my therapist's office.
Oh, that's good.
And then I turned around and looked at him and said, he said to me, well, why couldn't you just tell me some of this? Why couldn't we just sit down and talk about some of this? It was about the pain of when my mother was sick with cancer for 5 weeks. He ended up going on the road and having to work, and he left. And she practically died while he was, we kept her alive on machines to get him home. And I had a lot of pain around that. And he said, why couldn't you just come and talk to me about it? And it's a theme of my show and my book, which is that my dad's the truth teller, but in the Carlin family, you don't speak the truth.
Right. Well, that's
That's the denial. It's the
that's
alcoholism denial thing.
highly.
it's-
People would be surprised at how that is actually
Yeah.
how it works.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Jimmy. You know, as they say, Bing Crosby was a bastard
Yep.
of a dad.
Yep.
But he was.
There was a lot of those good dads on TV that were not
Yeah,
nice men at all. So yeah.
What I find interesting is that during that time that you are describing, I was actually with your father
Wow.
in Aspen.
Yes.
And
it wasn't. That was right
Yeah.
when my mom got sick. Yeah.
yeah, and I would have never known it.
Yeah, he could compartmentalize very well.
It was
Yeah.
amazing. I think I'll try to link to this on my Twitter feed after, but I interviewed him, and it's on my website.
Yeah, and to be clear, when
And this
he
is
was
right at that time.
But we didn't know she had liver cancer and she was dying at that point.
Okay.
That was late March when we found that out. I
Okay.
think Aspen was usually around February, late February, early March. And I think he had come home from that, and that's when we found out. But she was very sick at
Right.
that point, yes. And she did not she would have normally gone to Aspen with him.
Right.
And she ended up staying home and not going with him.
And then I saw him again right after your mother passed away.
Yeah.
And he seemed freakishly together. And I think
Yeah.
he was in
Shock. We were all in shock.
Shock
'Cause
and
it
some-
was
he went
it was 5 weeks from diagnosis to death.
Right.
So it was shocking.
And then he went on a book tour.
He did, and I ended up going with him those first 3
Right.
weeks because we had to be together. Yeah.
And then, and this must have been strange to watch as a daughter, and I don't know where you are emotionally during this period.
A wreck.
A wreck.
A wreck.
Your father does the special. He spends however long he spends writing and processing this stuff. And he does the special called Life is Worth Losing,
Yes.
which is not a comedy special.
No, it isn't.
And my hat is off to HBO. I equate it with Lou Reed's album Magic and Loss. And I don't say this in a negative way.
Yeah. It's a processing.
It is utterly fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
This is, to my very unprofessional diagnosis, a man in a deep, profound depression.
Yeah, and not acknowledging it.
Not acknowledging it,
Yeah.
and working through rage and helplessness.
Yeah.
And it's under the guise of a comedy special, but it is not a comedy special.
Right. There's humor, there's laughs, there's moments, he's weaving
Sure.
it in, but it was one of the ones where I would sit through and think, wow, okay.
Yeah, you commented as you look back at his work, there are things you always laugh.
Yep.
He can always make you laugh.
Yep.
My dad can always make me laugh. But there are things that make you cringe. What are the things that make you cringe? Are they just what you think are bummer jokes? Or things like that? To watch your dad go through such a wrenching.
Yeah, it's one thing to go after, I mean, and he did this well, and he walked this line well, where he could go after people. He never went after the weak or the oppressed. That was his line. But there was such rage and anger. There's people I can do without, and this list, and there was a lot of lists of things he could really do without.
Right.
And there was just, so it would be like, okay, 3 of them I could probably take, but 23 of them, I start to think, your rage is showing, Dad.
Right.
And that would make me cringe. That would be your unconscious emotional, like you said so beautifully, your unconscious, emotional material is showing through. And, yes, your job is to be the one who's outraged for us and to point the way at the outrage, to teach us anew what we need to be outraged by again because we've fallen asleep again. That is your job. We get that. But at some point, God, where's the humanity, Dad? Let's bring the humanity back. Could you do a fart joke, please? Just do a fart joke.
Well, that is what I find interesting about. It's the reason that Republican comedy and conservative right-wing comedy doesn't work.
Right.
Because defending the powerful is not solid ground for comedy.
It's never been.
Yeah, it's really not.
Yes.
And which
whole
is not
job of the fool.
to say that, as your dad put it so well, PC liberal campus assholes are not also powerful. And
100%.
It's not an MSNBC Fox thing.
No, it's not. No.
They're two colors of the same baloney. To a degree.
Yes.
To a degree.
Yes. No. We all.
Right.
He leaned.
I know.
He certainly
I lean in the
He
same
leaned
way.
that way too.
Always lean towards permissiveness.
Yes. And progress.
And progress. Right. But there's also what he said that was interesting is like, I love individual people. When they get into groups,
Yeah.
which is really so well put.
And I think that too, for him, is like, he was an introvert basically, and the groups that he could handle were he loved his audiences, he loved his fans, he really felt his fans were his extended family. He knew he could go into any city and there'd be a family there who would take him in. Like he really, and his heart, and I think being a latchkey kid who didn't have a dad and had a small family, and then he had me and we had a small family, that meant the world to him. But yeah, you get people, like he used to say, with an armband and a slogan and you're done for,
Right.
But he was basically an introvert. He was a loner. He was a kid at, 5 years old. He was catching the subway and going around New York City, in the early 40s. So
And yet, a painfully nice person.
Oh, yes, genuinely cared about every single human he met.
Yeah, and I had been in his company when people would approach him that didn't wholly respect his person, like, hey!
Yeah, sure. Enthusiastic fans.
Yeah, and he was never anything less than gracious.
He worshipped Danny Kaye, and he stood outside in the rain for 5 hours outside of a theater Danny Kaye was performing in, waiting for Danny Kaye's autograph. And Danny came out and walked by every single kid and didn't give an autograph. And he swore to himself, if I ever became Danny Kaye, I would never do that to anyone.
Good for him.
Yeah.
I have some questions here that people have sent in.
Excellent.
And these are, if you've seen the show,
I have.
these are choice questions.
Right, that's right. They do that here.
Right. So I'm going to run these at you. But I have to revisit one thing. Did your mother ever say, what about a shirt?
Collar. What a shirt with a collar.
collar.
Yeah. She tried.
Yeah. It was a long sleeve, collarless 3-button shirt.
Yeah.
He must have had 7.
He
did he just buy all of them?
Yes, he did. He did. When he died, I ended up with about 20 black long sleeve shirts. Sally just went, my dad's girlfriend, here.
And we'll get into that. Okay, these come in from Teal Pierce, which is not only a name, but a paint color.
And a Twitter person who I interact with often.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, then Teal has asked you.
Yes.
That sounds like when you move into a gated community. You can paint your home Teal Pierce, or Matt Warburton, who was a writer on The Simpsons and now runs the Mindy Project.
Yes.
His father names paints.
Wow. It's a fun job.
Yeah. And not as interesting, was arrested on the grassy knoll the day of the assassination. Okay. Teal Pierce asks you to please pick Class Clown or FM and AM.
Class Clown.
Right. Not even a choice. Solo or on? All right, now let me revisit that. Now I'm going to throw in one of my own. Class Clown or Jammin' in New York?
Oh, fuck you. Two different.
Two different people.
Yeah, but for me and how it impacted my life, like consciously as an adult, Jammin' in New York.
Solo or ensemble?
See, I'm split right down the middle on that one because there's two different joys in that. But Right now, I'm in solo mode, so I'm going to say solo.
Here's a question. Your dad was not only a comedian, but spent a long time with the main focus of his life being procuring and using mind-altering ingestibles. Mm-hmm. This, I think, is something specific to comedians. Could your dad listen? Clearly not. Moving on.
Yes, absolutely. That's what he was, when he would focus, like you were saying, when he was with a fan or something, you know, or if I needed his attention, yes, he was a great listener. Yeah.
Because that is something, one of the things about being a stand-up comedian that is pernicious is you travel alone, you stay alone if you don't have a Jerry Hamza with you.
Right.
And then you perform and you're alone. And you fall out of the habit of listening to people.
Yeah, I think having a long marriage with my mom, and then he was with Sally, and I think he was in a, you know, always had a solid relationship in his life. So I think that helped. And yeah, but I think I got my listening skills from my mother. So that said.
Still with Teal. Not a sport or losing things.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't either. Something tells me that they're possibly bits.
They may be bits. Not familiar.
Comedy or drama?
Drama.
Yeah, me too.
Always.
Well, because in comedy I do it. Why would I want to watch it?
My inner life is drama.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to watch. I don't want to go to work in my off time.
I do not go to comedy clubs and watch comedians. I didn't know a single.
God, no.
I didn't know a single comic till my dad died.
Yeah.
So clearly,
I totally understand. I totally understand that. Yeah. And did your dad have close friends that were big comedians? I know he had. I know lesser Chris Rush and people like that.
Once he died and these comedians started
Yeah.
talking to me, I found out he would have phone conversations often with A, B, and C, and
Yeah.
email exchanges, but there was no lunching with people or,
Right.
you know.
Beatles or Stones?
Beatles.
I would think possibly different if it was the Rolling Stones. Beatles or Stone Temple Pilots?
Right.
J. Patrick Rollo, who's a friend of mine from Boston, Massachusetts. Writing or reading? Which one can you do?
Oh, writing.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Oddly. Therapist or therapy?
Therapy.
Yeah. Bitching or listening? Bitching.
Exactly.
New York or LA?
Been here since I was 3. LA girl, but
Yeah.
I love me my New York too.
I'm terribly on edge when I'm in New York.
It's tough, isn't it? The energy? It's tough.
Yeah. I mean, it's specific to me, but I just like.
No,
I'm much more. I need trees around me.
I do
and,
too.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Stuff or shit?
Well, it depends whose stuff it is.
Right. Or whether or not it's in a toilet. This is clever. Fave or retweet?
Very good. I think the retweet is the end all of Twitter. So if I get retweeted, I know, man, I made the cut. Fave is kind of a half-assed.
Right.
All right, I like it, but I'm not willing to share it with my people.
It's also how babies retreat. This is from Tom R2D2, which is funny. Philosophy or psychology? That's a good one.
It is a good one. And philosophy, definitely.
I am fascinated how history is written by the psychology of its participants.
Right? Completely. When I studied psychology and I learned Freud and Jung and all those people, I saw, oh, I see. Freud's just working his own stuff out. Jung's working his stuff out.
Exactly.
They're just, and then they brought them out as theories for
Yeah.
everyone else. No.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own personal psychology theory. It's called My Fucked Up Head.
I just read the book Kissinger and Nixon, which is a sort of the description of their relationship during the White House years. And what is amazing is how those tumultuous years of the Nixon presidency from 69 to 74, how the most tumultuous years culturally in our country, very divisive, and it was just him visiting his psychodrama onto the nation.
Yeah, isn't it?
It's just, and
It's
how Reagan
Yep.
was a man who was an actor, had a healthy level of denial in his perception of reality.
Yeah,
You know, not an evil person,
right.
but believed what he believed and did not let facts interrupt his view of things.
Ever.
And the country also, in those years, went into a massive denial where things were great. We ran up a giant deficit. You know, it's just like, no,
Yeah.
everything's great.
Yeah.
It's morning in America.
Yeah.
And I just find it
That
fascinating.
is
how,
absolutely fascinating.
not just in
Agreed.
America, not just presidential politics. But,
Sure.
this one I'm not 100% sure I know the meaning of. Dream or ice cream?
I don't know, but both. I would
Yeah.
dream of ice creams.
Yeah. Earth or mirth?
Earth.
Yeah.
Sorry.
0 for 2, Tom.
Sorry, Tom.
Actually, 2 for 3, 1 for 3. Here's a great one. Superpower. Could you fly or invisibility?
This is always this question. I'd go with flying. I don't know. It just
Me
seems
too.
it seems like fun. It just does.
I agree. Here's a great one. Time travel. 1962 or 2662?
Wow. Can we do like 1862? I'd have to go in the future because the year before I was born, who cares?
Yeah. Oh, no, not me. I so would love to go back.
To 1962?
Yeah, or to revisit the 60s, I think would be fascinating.
I'd love to revisit Los Angeles in the 1800s. I would love to see the valley
orange
pristine.
groves.
I
Yeah,
know.
well, sure.
Pre-orange grove. I just
Right.
want to see the Indians. I want to see the smoke signals on the hill.
See, I would like to come back to LA and just drive around in like 64.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
Just when it was just
If I could be an
groovy.
adult in a car, 1962 would be fun. That's
Yeah.
true.
Just before things get spooky and weird.
Yes.
Just at that, like, you just seeing like actors. Well, I'm doing an Outer Limits, and then I'm doing Rat Patrol, and then I got a Twilight Zone.
And people were still contracted at studios.
Yeah, and,
Wow.
I'm fascinated by
Yeah.
by that. One of the grand traditions here at the Kevin Pollock Chat Show is the Larry King game.
Yes.
Now, your father had been interviewed by Larry.
Yeah, quite a few times.
Yeah. Who did he like in terms of talk show hosts? Because I know at one point Carson,
I don't
when he
know.
first went through his change, Carson said we shouldn't be on the show.
Yeah, but then he came around, and then my dad
Yeah.
guest hosted for a lot
Yeah.
of it. So,
Carson seemed like a cool guy.
yeah, I think my dad and Carson had a good. I mean, as much as a relationship as anybody had with
I think
Carson.
here's what I like. Here's what I think. Being somewhat familiar with that type of relationship, that your father took it seriously and he worked, and that Johnny knew if I have this guy on, he's going to do his segment, and he'll be
Yes.
entertaining, and he's going to, as Adam Carolla would say, burn calories.
Yeah.
He's not just going to come and go, oh, Johnny, how are you?
Oh no, my dad
Yeah.
hated the panel. He never talked about his real life on the panel. He always made up a family. I believe one of his sons' name was D'Artagnan.
Yeah.
And so he always had updated the family for Johnny.
Right.
He always had bits on the panel.
Yeah, always did bits.
Always did bits. Never talked until I got my master's in psychology, and he went on Leno a few months later and told Jay how proud he was that that my daughter Kelly just gotten her master's in psychology, and I nearly fucking fell out of bed.
Oh, wow.
Because he was talking about it was amazing. It was a miracle. So
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish that he had done more.
he hated it. I watched once. We were on the
Because
way
Class
to
Clown and Occupation Fool are very biographical, and I think that, like, to me, the finest example of stand-up comedy you can view is Richard Pryor live in concert.
I
the
agree.
first one.
I agree.
And he's just talking about stuff that he's done.
Yeah.
And, you know, as long as you keep doing stuff, you'll never run out of material.
Here was my dad's attitude about that. What he said to me when I started doing autobiographical material.
Right.
Was, you know, an artist, they start off doing autobiographical material, you know, like me with the class clown, occupational, but then I quickly moved on to more important things.
I respectfully disagree.
Me too, because I wanted to be Spalding Gray. So
Right.
I was like, oh, that's great, Dad.
Yeah.
Thanks, that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
So yeah.
One would argue
One
that would be more interesting than Where's the Blue Food?
One would argue that everything is autobiographical in the end.
Yeah.
So.
Ah, well put.
Yes.
Well, the Larry King game goes as such.
Yes.
You have to do your version of Larry King.
Yes.
Announcing at the top of the show who's on the show. You reveal something about Larry.
Yes.
That's possibly a little too personal to hear.
Right. Yes.
And then you might go to one
I
phone
go to
call.
a city or
Go to a
something.
city.
Yes.
Would you like to take a crack at it?
I would. Okay, so this is my Larry King, and tonight we have on. God, I didn't have any guests put in my head tonight. Tonight we have on Kermit the Frog and Nancy Reagan. And strangely, I don't know why I feel the urge to share this with you, the audience, but I've always wanted to go down on a Haitian woman. Faribault, Minnesota. Do we have a caller?
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
I once saw Larry at the Grove
Wow.
wearing a Oakland Raiders leather jacket that looked so heavy upon
I
his
was going to say,
frame,
it must have been huge.
I
on
thought
him.
it was going to pile drive him through the concrete.
He is a wisp of a thing.
Yeah, he's still around too.
He is. I believe he has breakfast every morning at a certain deli in
yes,
Beverly Hills.
slowly being replaced by a wonderful and charming praying mantis. Well, Kelly, I really cannot thank you enough for making the time on, especially on a Mother's Day, which is not only Mother's Day, but as you said, the anniversary of your mother's death.
It is.
What a
So
wonderful day for you.
Thank you for distracting me today.
Sure.
And thank Kevin for, letting us do this.
Yeah, this is really wonderful, and I would like to thank everybody who downloaded, watched, or tuned in. I especially like to thank Kevin, who's alone in the hotel room. So I think we can all imagine what's going on with Kevin right now.
Awkward.
One word, Kevin, in excess.
That's 2 words.
Yes, well, it's the name of the band. I meant the name of the band.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody
right. Sorry.
wants to be found dead that way, Kevin.
No, awkward. That's double awkward.
No one wants to be found dead that way.
Yeah, that's.
But thank you. I assume Kevin will be returning.
I believe
Or is
next
somebody
week,
else
yes,
coming back
next
in?
week.
Next week?
we will be back.
Or and then after that, Joan Rivers will be the permanent guest host. Joan Rivers, who's slowly turning into the cover of the book Communion. But I'd like to thank Kevin for letting me sit in. I'd like to thank Kelly for coming down. I'd like to thank Jamie and everyone for making me feel so welcome. And I'd like to thank all of you. All right, get out.
Get out.
Get out. Go home.
Go home.